In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And if you describe yourself as a scriptural literalist, perhaps a fundamentalist, or even a creationist, then this is simply the way that it was many years ago, as recorded in the scriptures in the first chapter of Genesis. Yet, despite the fact that at least before a global public health crisis, which for purposes of simplicity we may describe, although not technically correct, as the pandemic, that as of today has found 74.5% of adults, maybe even you, but only 52.7% overall fully vaccinated. That would be including the kids, which according to CDC translates into 175 million Americans. At least 71% of those Americans, or about 236 million, according to Pew Research Center, most affiliated with over 318,000 churches, large and small, depending upon preference, only about 60,000 of which actually possessed an organic capacity for online virtual worship before the pandemic. Only about 9%, about 21 million, a little less than 3 times the entire population of Virginia, would actually describe themselves as conforming to that Christian worldview. But still a distinct minority, even amongst those who self-identify as Christians. Are you a little uncomfortable? Don't feel uncomfortable. No judgments here. Yet in 2018, believe it or not, according to a YouGov survey, you have to ask yourself about that now. It's going to be on the test. According to a YouGov survey of over 8,000 Americans, they were able to determine from that modest sample that of persons who simply describe themselves as religious, 52% of those believed that, based upon evidence that they had found in the scriptures, believed that the earth was flat. 5 times more than the persons who still describe themselves as scriptural literalists, adherents to creationists, which a lot of people don't even want taught in schools. So let's begin this lesson in science by pondering this basic phenomenon, which is, as you should know, a word derived from the original Greek, as some seminary-educated faith leaders, to include theologians in academia, are often wont to say, is defined as an object or aspect, to use the Aristotelian notion, that is known through the senses. I can see it, I can feel it, I can touch it, rather than by thought or intuition, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. And you can actually get that online. As an administrative note, we shall be using these audio signals because signals are important of annotation to specific sources throughout the series. A lot of people don't do that. To inform you where you can go independently by yourself, to fact check, and which exercise should assist you in becoming what? More discerning. Even while engaged in casual, but not necessarily engaged in active listening. And to further refine and develop your capacity for what is so oft described as critical thinking skills. Some people make you pay for this kind of lesson. but which the League of Women Voters has suggested is a priority for building a more informed electorate, which is a good thing, to enable you to do your duty responsibly to vote. And that's a good thing. Anyone can pull a lever. Monkey can pull a lever. A guinea pig could pull a lever. You could probably teach just about anything to pull a lever. And that is why there is an age requirement for the exercise of the franchise right. Even if you believe that in a democracy, just anybody should be voting and able to vote, some people are running around trying to do that. And the choices do not matter as long as there is a majority who are making the choice, which provides a convenient segue for us to return to where we had begun this discussion. 9% of Christians, 9% of Christians, maybe you so describe, from 71% of Americans who so describe themselves as Christians, whether engaged in regular worship, attendance, virtual or in person, or not, believe that the world was created just as it says by the plain words in the book of Genesis. And that may be you. That may be you. So, as my introductory religion professor and ordained Presbyterian minister used to say at Washington and Lee University to his mostly freshman students, at the most competitive college in the Commonwealth of Virginia, right next door to far less competitive VMI, I am getting ready to rock your faith. Rock your faith. So, not rock the vote, but rock your faith. So, you have been warned. Dr. Sprunt, bless his heart, had a belief in a tough love that a faith that was not worthy to withstand rigorous examination was not worth holding. How do you build it up? You got to exercise a little bit. And Jesus has quite a few parables you may have heard in sermons or read about in your scriptures or discussed in a little bit in weekly Bible study, but you may still be a little weak in your faith. Got big, gigantic biceps, can run 5,000 miles, but with that faith, a little weak, especially after the public health crisis that closed your church and canceled your in-person worship. So if your mustard seed of faith is not strong enough to take on this little mountain we're going to bring here, I want you, in fact, I demand you, stop right now. Hear that? Stop viewing this video right now. You're not ready. Your faith is not strong enough. You are not Peter, the rock we're going to build the church on. The water is too deep, and we don't have a lifeguard for anyone who needs to be wading in the kiddie pool. Go back. Shark, shark, shark. Come back when you learn how to swim or learn how to walk on water. Because unless we are removed from YouTube again, we'll be right here. You can come on back. Nothing wrong with admitting your weaknesses. You know, that's why we pray sometimes. Kind of straighten ourselves. And some ladies say they love a man who is not afraid to show his feelings. So go on, and you can just pray on until you're ready, okay? Get along now. Just go away. So we have 21, you still here? So we have 21 million American folks who believe steadfastly in the creation story in the book of Genesis. Maybe you read it through James Weldon Johnson. He does a little version of it in The Creation. Same guy that wrote the Lift Every Voice and Sing song, American Black Anthem that we sing at football games and sports things now. We may have some division on King James Version, New International Version, Revised Standard Version. Many, many years ago, we had the Good News Version. Whatever version you choose to read with some regularity, stomp foot. But if you were in the Scopes monkey trial, State of Tennessee versus John Thomas Scopes, a high school science teacher, go science, in the small town, American town of Dayton, Tennessee, who was portrayed by, little factoid, Dick York, Darren from Bewitched. If you haven't seen it, go look at it on Netflix. The movie was what? Inherit the Wind. Inherit the Wind, very much like the coronavirus is in the air, as Lindsay Moore at B-Tech says. But it's a 1960 film, black and white, the original one. Historically, you would be siding with William Jennings Bryan. This is a name that you should remember from your American history. The presidential candidate railing against the gold standard in the days after the Civil War, who famously said that you shall not crucify mankind on a cross of gold. Very, very dramatic. We actually studied that in American oratory, American presidential oratory, many years ago back in college. This gives you an idea of how ideology, however, has changed in America just since the Great Depression. Just since the Great Depression, right before. Because most persons today who tend to be fundamentalists, especially in the red state, you may be in a red state, we're in a blue state, but in the red state of the South, tend to support the gold standard. Been to all the Trump rallies, down back, you know, conservative, gold standard. Believe in God, gold standard. But back before the Keynesian economics, FDR packing the court, your Bible thumpers in America were against the gold standard. Okay, so our Bible thumpers, as we evangelical Christians are often described, were opposed to the gold standard that Nixon practically eliminated. Remember that? Which remains a sore point for many who describe themselves as conservatives. The point here is that if you describe yourself as a progressive Democrat or a woke Christian, when we go back in time, we go back in a little time travel. We're going to be like Back to the Future. Your identity politics may not apply. Different. The labels mean something different. It was like an evolving politic, and you may experience, and not all of them, became Republicans and voted for Trump, and it's a little bit advanced. But you may experience some evolutionary pressure that is going to rock your faith in this series. So again, if your personal faith and utopia wings, or walk in the way of Jesus, if you prefer to say that, is getting a little threatened, feeling a little insecure, you need to grab a mask, get some vaccines, whatever, just feel free to turn off this video right now. Go watch something that is more comparable to your academic aptitude. I'm sure Sesame Street is on someplace. We don't want you to hurt yourself doing something for which you have no training or experience. Going out there like jumping off the diving board into the deep end and you can't swim. And don't worry, because we'll be right here when you feel that you are finally prepared for more elevated discourse. Now, you start here. If you are still with us, we are going to go back yet again. Always go back. Always be closing. Well, sometimes we're always going back. Yet again, to that 21 million Christians, representing some 9% of 236 million American Christians, some of whom may have already found something more within their comfort zone. I'm sure some, popular music video they can dance to is on. So you don't have to worry about hurting their feelings. They're gone. Elvis has left the building. He can talk now. And we are going to compare that small 9% of creationists to the reported 52%, remember that, who believe, based upon their understanding of what they have read in the scriptures, that the world is flat. And ask a simple political question. Now, the flat guy might be you. You got a flat top afro and you're just all flat. Based only upon the numbers, 9% and 52%. 9% creation, 52% flat earth. All Christians. Which Christians, creationists or flat earthers, holds the correct Christian view? Easy question. How about the correct view, scientifically, reality? In a majority rule understanding of political reality, we would have to say, tally up the numbers, flat earthers have defeated the creationists by a landslide. Isn't it obvious? So if you are a Christian who believes that the world is flat, you have won the election. Correct. All right. Let's not walk off the edgy of the world, as they used to say on an electric company. Okay. What is wrong about that type of thinking? What is wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Now think about that. This is a question we learn in what? College philosophy courses on Aristotelian logic. The first problem that you may have noticed is that your choice has been limited to only two choices. False dichotomy, right? You see this a lot in politics. Just like we have conservatives and liberals, Protestants and Catholics, Democrats and Republicans. Escaped from a lab or zoonotic evolution. And while this type of dualistic thinking may make for good science fiction movies, like Luke Skywalker and the Resistance, which you want to be a part of, against Darth Vader and the Empire, who you might really get into, Jean Valjean, if you're really into great musicals. And I personally hated Jean Valjean, or Joubert. He had a very dualistic view of reality. What did they say? It is either Valjean or Joubert. Like Luke Skywalker and the Resistance, but also on Star Trek with the Federation of Planets against Klingons. And George Takei, bless his heart, or shall we say Mr. Zulu, who, can you do that thing with your hand like Spock? Mr. Sulu, who may get a little angry, even though emotions are not logical emotions. Spock didn't have any emotions. He never got angry at anybody. He didn't even have sex. Only 7 years. And accused me of not living up to the Star Trek ideals in a science, logic, and compassion that compels us to do our duty and get vaccinated. Because he's not going to like me anymore, and I'm going to have to cry. If you believe that is a scientific and logical argument, then you obviously didn't go to a real college. Then you may need, let me try to remember I'm a Christian, then you may need to join the creationists and others who are not quite prepared with sufficient prerequisites to take this course, even on a pass-fail basis. You're just not ready for this conversation. You know, what does Jack Nicholson say? You can't handle the truth. Heck, you can't handle this class. You know, go grab some crayons, finger paint. But if you are still here, you may have noticed that this simplistic dualism, or black or white logic, right or wrong, either or, well conforms to the notion popular amongst who? Marxists and socialists. We're really getting political. That is described as Hegelian dialectics. Don Beyer got praised by the Falls Church News Press because he was able to talk about Hegelian dialectics with a thesis and an antithesis that are always in conflict, that compete to progress to a synthesis, which all sounds very academic to a moron because it uses fancy words, big words, more than two syllables, more than one syllable. But just recall that everything that has been simplified because whoever thought up this wonderful sales idea recognized that he could manipulate simple-minded people who are impressed very easily, who can only hold two thoughts in their little head and impress them by sounding like he was an intelligent, like they wanted to be. And you look like an intelligent person. You'd be surprised how many people fall for that line at the car dealership. So let's place a bookmark here and continue further in the next block of instruction, like I said in the Army, but for review, which we are so often required to do in training to make sure that our training objectives are met, even in the military. What were the big takeaways from this lesson? Number one, if you believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible, that may be you, and you may still be here, you are what is described as a scripturalist, and there is nothing about which to be ashamed about that if you have sufficient faith. You may not be ready to go out and be the wrong guy to attack right now. You don't have, ninja kung fu faith. But maybe in time, with proper preparation, a little exercise, you'll be ready to fight. Today, we may have just succeeded in temporarily applying some evolutionary pressure to help you to develop a stronger mutant strain, become that Delta variant for Christ. Keep faith, baby, as Reverend Adam Clayton Powell used to say. Number two, if you are a creationist, and again, this may be you and you may still be here, like 21 million Americans, you are not alone. Isn't that great? You are not alone in the universe. You got 21 million other people who believe that what happens in Genesis is exactly how it happened. Even if in a pretty small minority, don't worry, don't get scared, What do you say? What? Whom shall I fear? Even amongst your fellow Christians, though. And chances are pretty, not a large fellowship, and chances are pretty large that you may actually be the only creationist in your entire church. Don't worry. My daddy was a creationist. Didn't care if you thought bad of him because he was a creationist. And he grew a church from 50 members to about 2,000 because he had an advantage. He was like one of 2 college graduates in that crowd. People were like, hey, he may be a creationist, but he's going to college. And by the time he left, about half of the people had gone to college. And was still probably one of the only few creationists by the time he retired. But that did not get in his way. Did a lot of great things. Remember that if you believe your Bible, you can do all things how? Through Christ. Seeking first the kingdom of God, not his righteousness. All of these things shall be added unto you. And you should not what? Be ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Not even when you're sitting down at McDonald's and going to pray. You don't have to hide it. That little, the prayer cheat, kind of duck your head. Number 3. Now, this is a little concerning, and we really did not delve deeply into this part of the lesson. But according to one poll that we discussed, at least 52% of us may have never been on an airplane or joined Jeff Bezos on July 20th on a 10-minute roller coaster ride in July aboard Blue Origin, doing what Albert II, the rhesus monkey, did way back on June 14th, 1949, aboard a V-2 rocket, almost 72 years to the day before Jeff Bezos, and didn't even get an interview on Good Morning America. Imagine that. But also, old Albert didn't have to pay a billionaire for the opportunity to do so. So that may have been one very shrewd primate. Better watch out. Planet of the Apes. Albert's coming back. He gonna be, like Cornelius and Zera. Just because you heard that, hey, coronavirus took over the world, you never know. Just because you heard and close your church. Just because you heard that somebody performed a poll, there is something that we learn, especially in social science courses, a lot of social scientists, especially 39% of psychology majors, that's a social science, are not even employed inside their field. It's kind of like one of those, it's like going to law school and too many lawyers. But especially in social science courses, we learn what is described as regression analysis. Before you take that, there's a prerequisite. Oh man, you got to take statistics. Oh man, oh wow, before that you got to take calculus. Oh gosh, I was terrible in math. Well, okay, you ain't going to be a social scientist, but you're going to be pushing those burgers, even with a college degree. But in social science, we learn regression analysis and what is described as sampling error, which has a lot of significance, especially today if you are out diligently reading science reports. I know Assistant Director of the World Health Organization said that we weren't doing this in the beginning, but if you're diligently reading those reports on vaccine efficacy, raging infections, and all that science crap that is in the news every day, or at least little smatterings of it, or trying to decide if you should get vaccinated, or if vaccination was actually an intelligent thing for you to do. Maybe you're having some second thoughts, and maybe that's a healthy thing too. In sales, we learn to say over 90, no pain, no gain. Learned that at the gym. In sales, we learn to say over 90%, over 90%, and find some way to use that number to sell our product. I was a salesman in a former life. And by definition, exceptional intelligence means that not everyone is going to get invited to join Mensa or attend an Ivy League college for that matter. And we have 74.5% in a rather quick time of fully vaccinated Americans. Imagine that. So, okay, analytically thinking, don't think about the highest intelligence in that sample. Albert Einstein got vaccinated, therefore I am like Albert Einstein. Well, that's not even logic. Because even in social science, Albert Einstein may have lied just to get you to do it. Because even in social science, you wouldn't be surprised. even in social science, we tend to focus on that mean level of intelligence. Okay, that's little math. Think about what mean is. Average. You're going to take, all the numbers, add them up, divide. Mean level of intelligence to describe the characteristics of that particular group. Center of mass, as we say in officer evaluations for the military. Lowest common denominator of that group, 74.5% of Americans, is your identity politic in this politics. Need I say more? We all need to take that polling data to the Lord in prayer. Amen. Amen. And finally, number 4, we began to talk a little bit about some philosophy terms of logic to assist in becoming a more discerning Christian and voter and American, a normal everyday citizen, because, especially with all us folks running out doing duty, because we don't want a smooth-talking salesman at a car dealership to see us coming and say to himself, would you look at this sucker? And then say to us, you look like an intelligent person. So he can get a great commission, not in a Christian way, because we fail to remember that Jesus, remember the big Christian, said to his disciples that he sent us out as what? Sheep amongst the wolves. You are not the wolf. Well, hopefully you're not the wolf. But you are wrestling not just against flesh and blood, but against principalities. You know where this comes from in the Bible if you've been going to church. Ephesians, right? Against powers, against rulers of darkness of this world. We began this little thing about darkness. Against wickedness in high places. Where was the blind man in the account in Mark or John before his miracle meeting with a man named Jesus? He was in the dark. Where were did you ever read Plato's Republic? The analogy of the cave, the allegory of the cave. Where were they? They were in the dark. Come on now. He was like Al Pacino. Maybe you're like Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman, saying, I'm in the dark, Charlie. And he had been to the crossroads in his life. I used to have a ranger instructor who used to say that all the time. I come to the crossroads in my life. He always knew what the right path was, without exception. He knew, but he never took it. And you know why? Because it was too damn hard. And so he walked away. Missed his shot at the moon. He could have been a contender. Why does Rice play Texas? John F. Kennedy said. Not because it is easy, but because it is hard. But Charlie Sims in the movie, when he came to that crossroad in life, he chose a path that was the right one. The path that made a principle. And that's the path, young soldier, that leads to character. And are you ready to make that journey? Are you ready to take that leap of faith? AIDA, ladies and gentlemen, attention. I know I have your attention. You are not on the lot with a pocket full of money, not wanting to buy something. Interest. I know that you're interested. You don't listen to church stuff this long if you are not a little bit interested in Jesus. Decision. Have you made your decision for Christ? Action. You need not answer now. But God doesn't promise anyone tomorrow. And you don't want to wait until too late. You don't want to be that guy on the news crying because he should have gotten the vaccine, scared to death and want to say anything, and looking like a fool to everybody else. But that is enough tough love for now. How do you feel? You feel strong? How's your faith? Is it a great day to be in the army of the Lord? Our next topic will be another exploration in science and education. The Intelligence Committee just completed a classified report on the origins of a novel coronavirus that closed your church for a year and may find you wearing a non-medical grade facial covering that NIOSH back in the Obama administration a decade ago had determined with the very same diagnostic equipment that is used to rate the N95 medical grade mask. And regardless of what Fauci says in evolving science, it failed. That test failed it. If your car fails the state inspection, do you make up an inspection test so it can pass? Well, that's what they tried to do. And still not even one study has ever validated your facial covering that you are wearing to protect yourself as an extra level of protection. Technically, it is not even a mask, regardless of what the sign at 7-Eleven said, because we all know everybody that works in 7-Eleven is like Albert Einstein. It's actually effective, just like your vaccine that has been tested multiple times for efficacy, but not even one for effectiveness. They are distinct terms to a scientist. And for one reason or another, they're not telling you that. For which you must know the infectious dose to determine the correlates of protection. You may have just heard that term on NPR because Fauci just pulled that out on a slide at the White House at the beginning of August. Correlates of protection, something you should know, just like 20 years ago we knew the difference between herd immunity and herd effect. 1 month before FDA rushed ahead and approved the Pfizer vaccines for private label marketing for profit, so they can sell you vaccines. Third dose, because looks like you need a third dose. Built-in durability. But next time, rather than discussing the current issue of the origins of a novel coronavirus, we will go all the way back to a Genesis when God created the heaven and earth. Imagine that. We're going to get into a little theology back inside the Bible. When God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, for all of our creationists. And going back to that first day in creation, be sure to invite every one of your Darwinist friends, because we are going to delve not into the beginnings of a Big Bang in the universe, or even discuss if aliens placed us on Earth like Adam and Eve, but rather we shall do some time travel back to the primordial soup to discuss the origins of viruses, which you probably do not know. Actually, 4 theories. Like most things, you should be able to figure out on your own by rigorous study. They don't teach you that in school. In passive listening, it is supposed to prepare you to think like a rational adult and not a mimicking parrot or a roboton that simply does what it is told to do. Are you up for a mental adventure? Ready to boldly go where no man has gone before? As old Doc Martin, our logic professor at Washington, only used to say, are you ready to set sail to the deep oceans to begin to rebuild your ship at sea, gripping first at the floorboards to feel the water rushing up at your face? Because just like resolving anomalies is the real work of a scientist, according to Dr. Kuhn at Harvard, to develop a theory that can be replicated and predict future outcomes with a pretty stable or static paradigm as its goal. Remember, E equals MC squared. What does the C stand for? Constant. The goal of a philosopher is to seek the truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Live long and prosper, Star Voyagers. This briefing is unclassified, as you were. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for Arlington Public School Board. Let's keep Mike Webb away from our schools. Honest. Carry on. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
THUNK, I could have had a vaccine.